All right, now back to endocrine system. This is our list that we left off with last time, where we're going with our glands, and we are going to start off with the master regulatory gland of the endocrine system, and this is the pituitary gland. Notice the title of the slide. It's not just pituitary, is it? No, hypothalamus. Because this really is a team that's working together here, and it's going to become very apparent very quickly that the the pituitary just isn't working on its own. So when we look at where we find the pituitary gland, this is like a little grape that is hanging just inferior to the hypothalamus. Here we see the optic chiasma. If you're looking at the brain in lab, I think we did that last semester, you probably and hopefully saw where the optic chiasma was. It's going to be just in front and just inferior to that is where you would find the pituitary gland. As you can see, our little grape that's hanging down is really two lobes to the pituitary, the anterior lobe and the posterior lobe. Not only are they different in location, they're really different in their histology and how they function. And a couple of different names that you have, the anterior is called the pars distalis, which I don't know who named it that. I really prefer the adenohypophysis. Hypophysis is another name for the pituitary. Adeno speaks to the histology. Have you ever heard of anyone that had adenocarcinoma? Adeno as a prefix means glandular. So the adenohypophysis is tissue that resembles more of a gland. And actually it comes from the Greek that means an acorn. So I don't know where they got an acorn from that. If you're from East Texas, it's acorn. But that's adeno. Versus the posterior pars nervosa neurohypophysis. This tissue really looks like a bunch of neurons all clustered together. So histologically it looks different, and how they work is also going to be different.
Are we going to have both of these names on the test, or should we only know your preferred name?
I want you to know anterior, posterior, and I think the adeno and the neuro, that will take care of you really, really well.
So which lobe is the pars intermedia?
The pars intermedia, I think it's actually, you see right here, that is, again, it's going to be right in the middle, and I can't remember. Yeah, well, that's what we're going to talk about, and that's why we have this dude right here. It's right in the middle, that's why it's intermedia, and you have the tuberalis, which is this neck around here. They kind of tried to color it, the artist, color it to show you that the tuberalis looks more like our adeno, and I think they're trying to say the intermedia looks more like the anterior. But for us, we're just going to stick with these two. Okay, we're not going to complicate it with all those other parts. The anterior and the posterior adeno and the neuro hypophysis. So the posterior neurohypophysis, we're going to start here first. The posterior stores and regulates the release of hormones. Did I say it produces hormones? It stores it and it regulates the release, because the hormones are synthesized, aka produced, where? In the hypothalamus. This is that partnership, and that's why we have hypothalamus in that introductory name. Here you can see in the hypothalamus, we have some regions, paraventricular nucleus, supraoptic nucleus. That's not necessary you know the names of those, but do you remember what a nucleus is in the central nervous system? What is it? Collection of nerve cell bodies. In the peripheral nervous system, it's a ganglia. Okay? So these neurons are going to produce hormones, and they're going to be transported down axons. That seems weird. But when you think of a neuron, it's going to create a synapse with another neuron or with a muscle or with a gland. And what's going to happen at the synaptic knob? That neuron is going to secrete neurotransmitters. So neurons are secretory. And here we're almost using them as glands to produce hormones. And when we look at this tract of these axons that are coming from the hypothalamus down to the posterior pituitary, that is referred to as the hypothalamo, not in San Antonio, the Alamo, hypothalamus, the hypothalamo, hypophyseal, which is pituitary, tract. A tract is a pathway. Now again, when we talked about glucagon, glycogen, and glucose last semester, they sound a lot alike. We're going to have another one of those coming up with the anterior. So remember, posterior neurohypophysis, the HH tract. We got a different name for the other side. All right?
So how do they travel again?
They're it's just like your neurotransmitters. Everything is produced in the nerve cell bodies, even in your neurons. Then they are transported down the axon. And it's really cool because all of your secreted material is transported in vesicles along microtubules. It's like a railroad track. And you have these little molecules called dynein and kinesin that grab onto the vesicles. It's like, you know the leaf cutter ants? They'll carry these big ginormous leaves and you'll look and they're just walking around in your yard. There's little bitty ants carrying them. Dynein and kinesin will have this big vacuum, this big vesicle, and they'll be these molecules walk along the microtubules and transport either to the end or back to the cell body.
So even though there's like a membrane potential going on in the neuron?
No, there's no membrane potential. These little molecules have ATPase activity. They can cleave energy from ATP and use it to change their shape, and they just walk. Literally walk. You Google dynein kinesin, you will find a little movie of one of these molecules from a transmission electron microscopic view. It looks like just two legs. They took different pictures of these molecules in different conformations, and when they put them together, it's just two legs doing this right here, down a microtubule. It is really cool. All right, hormones get released at the bottom, the posterior pituitary, where the hormones are stored, and then the release is regulated. Once again, the posterior pituitary, the neurohypophysis, does not produce the hormones. Hypothalamus does the production.
So it's just like the movement of it?
Well, it's produced here, it's transported along the HH tract, and then it's stored and its release is regulated in the posterior pituitary. Now there's two really important hormones that function in the posterior and are controlled release by the posterior. Number one is oxytocin. Oxytocin, this is one of the hormones that is going to be one of the few that is regulated from positive feedback in the human body, mostly in the female human body. Because ladies, at the end of pregnancy, the baby is going to signal your hormones to, number one, go crazy, and number two, to produce oxytocin. Oxytocin is going to cause contractions of the uterus. When the uterus contracts, there's a positive feedback to the hypothalamus to make and release more oxytocin, which causes the contractions to get harder and come faster, which causes more oxytocin. And you see the cycle, right? It stops when the baby is shot across the room. So the doctor better be ready to catch. That's oxytocin. But oxytocin doesn't just work that way. It can also, when the baby's born, we're mammals, the baby wants to feed, suckle, and milk production is important, and that comes also from oxytocin. But this is why we've got the little hearts in our picture. Oxytocin is the love hormone. Danger, Will Robinson, danger. Because physical contact causes your hypothalamus to produce more oxytocin. More oxytocin wants you to have more physical contact. And more physical contact leads to more oxytocin. Then all of a sudden, you're in love. But you're really not. Because you don't even like the person. So, my message to you, having 3 daughters, 2 granddaughters, and twin hard-headed boys, don't be loving up on somebody you don't like. Oxytocin will rot your brain. Okay? So when your parents say it's just your hormones, they were right. It's oxytocin. And we know that now. It's more than just a feeling. Isn't that a song? It's more than just a feeling? All right. Now, here is our V for vasopressin. You remember in that protein? The V, anti-diuretic hormone. What's a diuretic?
Makes you pee.
Makes you pee. Great. Okay, you don't have to use fancy words, okay? Make it make sense. A diuretic makes you pee. An anti-diuretic does what? Makes you not pee. That's it. It makes you conserve water. And the name of that one is vasopressin, sometimes abbreviated ADH. So, this is released from the posterior pituitary when you're dehydrated. Your kidneys don't need to make its normal amount of urine if you're dehydrated. And you typically don't. But when you're dehydrated, your urine gets really, really dark yellow. Your urine, when you're fully hydrated, should be very, very pale yellow or even clear. How many of you would go ahead and confess you're dehydrated most of the time? I've got my hand up, okay? I drink coffee. I'm just glad my urine's not brown from the coffee. But we don't get enough water. We don't. And honestly, have you seen the athletes and the weightlifters and stuff carrying around their gallon jug of water? They're almost dead on with what you need every day. I can't do it. I can't drink that much water. When you look at how much protein you're supposed to eat to build muscle, I can't do that even. Can't afford to eat that much. So we need to be hydrated, and this is a very important hormone that does that. Causes the kidneys to decrease urine output, and you conserve water, keep it in the body. It also is going to stimulate your hypothalamus to go, hey, stupid, drink some water. That's how you get more water, right? You don't eliminate as much, and you ingest more water, which is what happens when you're thirsty. Now, in high doses, and this is at your ultimate level of dehydration, ADH can be a vasoconstrictor. What is another way you can lose fluid? If you have an injury and you're bleeding out, right? You have 5 liters of blood. Most of your blood is water. So if you're bleeding out and your blood pressure is dropping, what is the one thing you want to do? You want to shut down the blood vessels so you don't bleed as much. You see how that works? Vasopressin is important, not just for maintenance, but also in emergency situations. All right. Adenohypophysis, the other lobe. We said adenohypophysis. What did adeno mean? Besides acorn? Gland. Glands produce material. So here in the adeno, we actually do produce some of the hormones. Not all, but we produce some. We're also going to get some hormones from the hypothalamus. We're also going to get some hormones from this neck region that is also glandular material. But instead of neurons transporting the material, we have these capillary networks, and these are called portal systems. Capillaries where you don't usually have capillaries that don't exchange oxygen and CO2, but they exchange material. In this case, we're going to pick up hormones from one region, and we're going to transport them to another region where they're released into the anterior pituitary. Now in the posterior, our neurons were called the HH what? Tract. Here in the anterior, we've got the HH portal system. One's neurons and one's capillary networks. Make sure you don't confuse which one goes where, because there's a big difference between neurons and blood vessels. All right? Now, with the endocrine system, we transport hormones in the bloodstream. So it makes sense that we're going to have direct connections between hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary, and it makes sense we're going to have a lot of blood vessels in both the anterior and posterior, because that's how these hormones are going to get out to the body. A lot of blood vessels, a lot of capillaries. So here we have in the anterior, this is the portal system. The hypothalamus is going to secrete materials into this region. There we see a cluster of blood vessels that pick up the materials. As we come down to the anterior pituitary, we have a second cluster of capillaries. We usually only have one. When you have this additional, that's the definition of a portal system. And in this capillary cluster, this is where we're going to be able to store the materials in cells, and we're going to be able to release them from these cells, get them into the bloodstream, and take them out to the body. So we have two ways to get these anterior pituitary hormones into the bloodstream. From these neurons in the hypothalamus, which is kind of similar to what we saw with the posterior, but with the glandular endocrine cells down here in the adeno, pumps them directly into that capillary network. Questions?
So, unlike the anterior, so the posterior has those still. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, this puts them both together. Here you can see the portal system, the blood vessels. Here you can see the tract. This is coming over into the posterior pituitary, and our blood vessels, and these portal system blood vessels are coming down here into the adeno. Okay? HH tract is the neurons. HH portal system is going to be over here for the adeno.
So how do the posterior pituitary hormones leave that HH tract then? Just along capillaries?
Yeah,
along the surface?
they can get out here from the capillaries, because capillaries, here's a little intro. You're going to hear me say this almost as much as norepinephrine is not a hormone. Capillaries are the only vessels that allow exchange. Not arteries, not veins, not arterioles, not venules. Capillaries. So when you see capillaries, that's where exchange is happening. All right, so with our hormones, again, we talked about the categories early on, about the different categories of hormones, and we talked about the releasing hormones. So in this, we have from the hypothalamus releasing hormones that are going to stimulate the production of other hormones, principally in the anterior pituitary. And we also have inhibiting hormones that are going to slow them down. So it's going to be this antagonistic relationship, kind of like insulin and glucagon, one trying to decrease glucose in the blood, one trying to increase it. Between these releasing, stimulating, and inhibiting, decreasing hormones, that's how we're going to balance what the anterior pituitary is going to release or not, and how much. So that's the real value of what's happening in the hypothalamus. Now, what hormones are being regulated? We got a list, and we're going to go through each one of these. Thyroid stimulating hormone. I don't know about you, but when I was a student, I loved scientific terms that were named based on what they did. It made my life much easier. So what do you think thyroid stimulating hormone does? Stimulates the thyroid gland to release its hormones. Ta-da! Bingo.
So that opens the gland and allows the hormones.
Well, the gland is always working. It's just going to kind of be at the last step, and we're going to talk about what the thyroid does. But you've got all of this material in those follicles of the thyroid, and when thyroid stimulating hormone hits, it causes your thyroid to release T3 and T4.
Okay.
And these are the bioactive forms of the thyroid hormone. All right. Prolactin. Lactation means what? Producing milk. So prolactin is the hormone that is going to prepare breast milk production and cause the mammary gland to release the milk. And guess what's going to increase the production of prolactin? The baby suckling on the breast. So here's another, if you can imagine, positive feedback. The more the baby suckles, the more prolactin, the more milk needs to be produced. Again, from the anterior pituitary. This is kind of a category of hormones, the gonadotropins. Tropins and trophic usually means what's being controlled, what's going on. And so this is our follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, and luteinizing hormone, LH. These are the two hormones in females that controls your menstrual cycle. And so this is regulated by the anterior pituitary. Now, males also produce follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormones, but these hormones have a different effect. They're going to regulate the development of sperm and the release of testosterone, which affects secondary male sexual characteristics. But again, they're both working on reproductive systems. And I think that's where we get the gonad as part of that. Ovaries and the testes are the male-female gonads. Adrenocorticotropic hormone. Whew. Aren't you glad this is a scantron and not a fill-in-the-blank to have to spell that correctly? It abbreviates ACTH. ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. This is another hormone that is going to indirectly affect kidney function. But as the name implies, this hormone from the anterior pituitary is going to stimulate the adrenal gland. Now, when you hear adrenal gland, immediately what do you think about? Adrenaline. Stop it. Stop it. Because adrenaline comes from the middle of the adrenal gland, which is called the medulla, the middle M, medulla, middle. The cortex is the outer part of the adrenal gland, and there are 3 layers to that, and there's hormones produced in each of those 3 layers that we'll talk about. So there's much more happening in the adrenal gland than just adrenaline / epinephrine.
So, does that like have any effect, like, or any similarities to cortisol like being made, or like the lead to cortisol?
So cortisol really is a stress hormone, and your body reacts differently to stress. ACTH is really going to control water balance. Cortisol not directly and not as much. So ACTH, an antidiuretic hormone, aldosterone, the other one that we had on our list, those are controlling water balance. And if you have all these different hormones controlling something, what does that kind of tell you about what's being controlled? It's pretty important. Sugar, your sugar level being balanced with 2 different hormones instead of just one. What does that tell you? Sugar in your blood is pretty important. Have you ever known someone with diabetes? It's a challenging disease, syndrome, and if your sugar gets out of balance, high or low, you're in trouble. So it's important. Yeah. Growth hormone. Growth hormone produced by the anterior pituitary is going to stimulate the liver to produce growth factors that, again, these growth factors are going to influence the growth of your body. Muscular, bone. Probably by this time, if you're 22, 23, probably your bone growth is done. You remember the epiphyseal growth plate from last semester? It's probably all cartilage now. You're probably not going to get any taller. So short people, I'm sorry. Question, somebody had a question.
That slide, did you say ACTH affects your kidneys? Is that right?
Well, I'm sorry, did I mean kidney? Adrenal gland. And the adrenal gland is going to produce glucocorticoids, which we'll get to, and that's going to affect the kidneys.
Okay.
Yeah. So indirectly.
Thank you.
So again, it's no surprise, growth hormone is going to affect cell growth, cell division. Why do we put cell growth there in addition to cell division?
Part of the cell cycle.
What important parts of your body don't make more cells, but the cells get bigger?
The bones? The bones?
Bones are kind of making more cells, but there's one other major tissue. Added fat, well, yeah, that's the bad one. We don't want that to happen. But yeah, you don't make more fat cells. Your fat cells just get bigger. There's only one way to decrease the number of fat cells, and what is it? Liposuction. But if you have liposuction and you just return to your lifestyle, the remaining fat cells are just going to fill in all that space again. Those mean old fat cells. Muscle cells. Muscle cells hypertrophy, which means they add more myofibrils and they get bigger. I mean, these competitive bodybuilders, their muscles are huge. They don't have more muscle cells. It's just the cells they had are filled with more myofibrils, and that's how they're stronger. So that's why they include growth and cell division. Right? Melanocyte stimulating hormone, MSH, anterior pituitary, again, it's what the name says, it's what it does. It causes your melanocytes to produce more melanin. And this is going to protect your body from ultraviolet radiation. It's not that your body hates you and it doesn't want you to tan, because tanning is your protection against DNA damage. And the more tan you become, the more harm you're doing to your body. I'll step off my soapbox now. Before I came to SFA 20 years ago, I did 7 years of cancer research at the Medical Center in Little Rock, Arkansas. So I like cancer. When we get to respiratory system, you're going to hear my spiel on smoking too. And I've got some horrific examples of patients at the cancer center that will help you understand how addictive it is, and don't start. All right. Okay, let's get to our next endocrine organ, the thyroid gland. Does everybody know where the thyroid is?
Yes.
It's up here in your neck. Basically, it's inferior to the thyroid cartilage. It's part of the pharynx in that region, anterior to the trachea. You have two lobes of the thyroid, and often you have this tissue that crosses across the middle. It's called the isthmus. If you happen to be any kind of head and neck surgeon or operating in that room, if you're a med-surg nurse, I think about 50% of the population will also have a lobe right in the middle that projects up, almost like an arrowhead. It's like a triangle, so they call it the pyramidal lobe. So you don't want to go just hacking around in there until you're sure exactly what's there and what's not. All right? Is it any surprise that we have an endocrine gland that is highly vascularized? You understand what vascularized means? What does that mean? Lots and lots of blood vessels. So if you're working on the thyroid, you're going to have a lot of bleeding. So that's something that you also need to watch out for. The thyroid gland is basically this collection of swimming pools. That's what it looks like to me. Looks like you're flying around and you look down, it's like, oh, look at all those swimming pools in those backyards. Have you ever done that when you're coming in for a landing at the airport over a residential area? It's like, wow, that's the rich part of town. Look at all those swimming pools. And so you have these cells that surround all of this acellular material inside. These are called follicular cells because they define the follicle. Right? That's ingenious, isn't it? Cells that define the follicles are called follicular cells. And they contain, and when you look at it right here, it looks like just a hula hoop, but understand this is a sphere. A sphere of follicular cells contain the material inside that collectively is called colloid. And I also want to point out protein rich. Underline protein there because the protein part's going to be important. Protein rich material in the middle of the follicles called colloid. And it's going to be material in the colloid that is going to allow us to produce the end product of our thyroid hormone synthesis, that is T3 and T4. Those are the active thyroid hormones. Okay, here comes some other similar sounding thing that you're going to need to pay attention to. Cells that are adjacent to the follicles, and I'm looking here, I'm not sure if we've got a good example, but parafollicular cells. What does para typically mean? Near. What is perimeter? Where's a perimeter of a circle? Around. Para, in this case, are cells that are near or around the follicle. They would be associated in this region. Again, don't have a great example of one here. Parafollicular cells. I'm telling you this because coming up in a slide or two, we're going to have parathyroid gland. So don't confuse parafollicular with parathyroid.
So our lab manual actually shows lumen and colloid being separate.
The lumen is the hole. The colloid is the stuff that fills the hole. Yeah.
Does parafollicular cells have a purpose?
Yes, they do. Parafollicular cells produce calcitonin. Guess what component of the blood calcitonin regulates? Calcium. Again, whoo, it sounds like what it does. Calcitonin regulates calcium levels in the blood. And this is going to be tantamount to insulin and glucagon regulating sugar. We're going to have an antagonistic hormone that is going to control calcium in the other direction. All right? It's because calcitonin is produced by parafollicular cells. Another name for these cells are C cells. The letter C, because they produce calcitonin.
It regulates calcium in the blood?
In the blood, yeah.
Does it increase or decrease?
I knew you were going to ask that. I believe, I believe it increases.
Okay.
But I'm not a 100% sure. I got a 50-50 shot, right? So insulin decreases, and if I recall right, that means calcitonin, which is the first one I talk about, is opposite of that and increases. Somebody check, Google calcitonin. Does it increase or decrease? Because it's going to drive me crazy if I don't know. You think increase? I think calcitonin.
Does calcitonin what?
Calcitonin, increase or decrease calcium levels.
So parafollicular cells are also called C cells?
Correct, because they produce calcitonin. It what? Decreases, dang it. Okay, strike one. Huh? I'll owe you $50. All right, calcitonin, like insulin decreases glucose in the blood, calcitonin decreases calcium in the blood.
I think that deserves some extra credit for class.
You are working it already, aren't you?
No, put it up for test.
Okay. So moving right along quickly, get myself out of this. Inside the follicular cells, and here's the colloid here, the way we're going to synthesize thyroid hormone. We must have iodine. Iodine is the critical mineral component. Your body can't make iodine. So where do you get iodine?
Your diet.
You get it from your diet. And long, long time ago, people realized that Americans or maybe humans weren't getting enough iodine in their diet. So someone somewhere said, how can we get people to ingest more iodine? Where did they put iodine?
Salt.
In your salt, iodized salt. Because how many of you are going to eat eggs or your chips without putting salt on it first? Okay, here's a question. Don't be shy. Be truthful. How many of you crazy people salt stuff before you taste it?
Okay.
Raise your hands. Y'all are, why? Before you taste it?
Well, especially here.
Okay. A buddy of mine, I swear he's going to die of a stroke. He salts his French fries. He puts, he's got a thing of ketchup. He salts his French fries, dips it in the ketchup, salts the ketchup on the salted French fries, and then eats it. My blood pressure goes up just watching him.
I do put salt on my chips at a Mexican.
Yeah, my wife does that, so yeah, she does it. I let her go. I'm not telling her what to do. Okay. Now, what molecule did I say was in the colloid? It was what kind of rich? Protein rich. The protein is called thyroglobulin. It's a big, long chain of proteins that have a lot of one of our favorite amino acids, tyrosine, on it. And this thyroglobulin attaches iodine to it.
Can you say that part about thyroglobulin again?
Yeah, thyroglobulin is a long chain protein. And it's got a lot of tyrosines. And iodine attaches to the tyrosines on thyroglobulin. And when you attach one iodine, you get MIT. No, not the university. Monoiodotyrosine. Now, you slap another iodine on that same tyrosine. Now it's DIT, diiodothyronine. Diiodotyrosine. Guess what number 3 is? Triiodo. Let's get to, I don't want, here we go. We have the pre's that have to be enzymatically processed. This is where I want to go. I don't have triiodothyronine. Anyway, T3 is triiodothyronine. There we go. Notice it's not tyrosine anymore. We call it threonine. T4 is not quad. They call it thyroxine. Now, don't get confused because T4 is the end product. And there's 90% of the T4 being produced. 90%. 10% of what's produced is T3. But T3 is way more effective, bioreactive-wise. So T3 is the business end of what the thyroid produces.
What about MIT and DIT?
They're part of this cycle, and if they're not used, they're recombined. Because see here, you can take the DIT and the MIT and you can mix them together.
Oh.
So they stay out in the colloid if they're not immediately used and taken up. Because the cell's going to take the T3 and T4, endocytose it out of the colloid, bring it into the cell, package it, get rid of the protein, and the iodines that are attached to the tyrosine, that's what gets into the bloodstream.
Gotcha.
That's the control of that release. This is just the factory where it's all put together. And this is another example of that showing, let's see, here's our tyrosine residue. There you see 1 iodine, 2 iodines. Here we've attached another tyrosine for the 3, and here we've got the 4. So that's what it actually looks like from a chemical structure standpoint.
So you need peroxidase, or peroxidase.
It's enzymatically controlled. We're not going to get into the weeds of which enzymes. If you want to do biochemistry, you can. All right, what does thyroid hormone do? It is largely with metabolism. And so it causes the liver to increase glucogenolysis, breaking glucose off of glycogen. It also causes gluconeogenesis. This is the production of glucose from other starting materials. Your body can make glucose when you're short of glucose, and it's gluconeogenesis. Fat, you're going to break down fat, produce energy. And when we look in your body, all cells, especially your neurons, increase metabolic rate, heart and lungs, increase breathing. When you increase breathing, what are you putting into the blood? Oxygen. You're increasing heart rate. You're moving more blood, the stronger contraction of the heart. Metabolism and getting your body to work. That's what thyroid hormone does. And when you jack up the thyroid hormone, you got problems. And thyroid disease is a major problem, especially ladies, as you're getting on premenopausal. That's when you're going to start having problems. Hypothyroid is a big one. Okay, that's where you can't not lose weight. You continue to gain weight. And there's other diseases, Hashimoto's disease, lymphocytic thyroiditis. It's the most common cause of goiter in women. You may have to have your thyroid removed. You may have to have radiation therapy. Thyroid cancer, depending on which cells form cancer from the thyroid, it's one of the easiest to treat. Because if it's the glandular cells that produce the T3 and the T4, they take up iodine, right? What other cell in your body takes up iodine? None. So you give the patient radioactive iodine in relatively low doses because the cells take it up and concentrate it in such a way that you only kill the thyroid glandular cells, including the thyroid cancer cells of that gland, and that's it. So it's like if you got to get a cancer, get the adenothyroid stuff. Easy to treat.
I was going to ask, is this why like people with thyroid conditions also have increased risk for diabetes because of the effect on gluconeogenesis?
Metabolism, nutrients, all of that. Yeah. Okay.
Does IGF have a role in adipose tissue buildup too, or is it just in muscle and growth?
Say that first part again.
IGF, insulin growth?
Yes.
So it's in both fat and muscle, okay.
All right, I should have had this slide a little bit closer. It would have saved me. So there are C cells. So calcitonin is released much like when your sugar's too high, insulin's released. This is going to reduce that. So it works kind of in that same way. Calcitonin is also going to inhibit osteoclast activity. What do osteoclasts do? They eat stuff, vacuum, they break down bone. And that's one way to release calcium. Also, if you've got too much calcium, calcitonin is going to cause you to excrete it in your urine, trying to get it back to those normal levels as quickly as possible. Because probably in ANP1, you've begun to appreciate calcium does everything. Calcium is used everywhere. But too much of a good thing is still too much, right? So we're going to reduce calcium levels with calcitonin. Now, here's the comparison. I warned you, right? Parafollicular cells. This is a much better histological slide. I actually took this slide from my histology class, my histology lab that I teach. These are the follicular cells. There's the colloid. That is a group of parafollicular cells. See those? Now, let's jump over here. First of all, this is a pretty high magnification picture. You can see these individual cells, right? This is a much lower magnification. These are huge follicles in the thyroid gland. You can't see the individual follicular cells there. Then you've got this near the thyroid follicles. That is a parathyroid gland. You see the difference? These are parafollicular cells within the thyroid. This is a parathyroid gland beside the thyroid gland. And when I say beside, this is sort of where they're positioned. Those little peanuts out there.
Where the parafollicular glands?
Parafollicular cells are going to be, kind of down here around the follicles. They're in the thyroid tissue itself.
Oh, and then that's the gland.
And this is the parathyroid gland itself.
So the little peanuts are the large purple.
Yeah, this is the whole thyroid gland, and the little yellow that you see here, that's what that is, the parathyroid. Okay.
Now, is it just depending on the stain, or like if we're looking at a stain in lab, they'll be like physically darker and pretty much
When you look at the histology in lab, these cells are going to be much more tightly packed together, and it's the colloid that really helps distinguish thyroid tissue from parathyroid, regardless of what color it is.
There's no colloid inside the gland
Nope.
itself.
No, completely different. Completely different. Because what we see, the cells in the parathyroid are called chief cells, and they produce materials directly into the bloodstream. They don't have a swimming pool to store the stuff in for metabolic processes. And really, what the chief cells are producing is parathyroid hormone. I like parathormone. That just is kind of fun to say, parathormone. Parathormone does the opposite of calcitonin. So calcitonin decreases calcium in the blood, like insulin decreases glucose. Parathormone increases calcium in the blood, just like glucagon increases glucose in the blood. A very similar relationship, one working with glucose and one working with calcium. Again, just like we saw with calcitonin, parathormone is going to cause calcium to be released by bone tissue. How's that going to happen? Increase the activity of osteoclasts. And we're going to cause the kidneys not to secrete as much urine, calcium in the urine. We're going to conserve calcium to keep it in the blood.
So does this increase the activity of osteoblasts, like building bone?
I don't know if, no, I don't think so. This is just focused on calcium at this point. And you wouldn't want to build more bone because that's going to use calcium.
Oh, okay.
So I would probably say no.
Now, is it common, like, to ever see patients with just specific diseases, like hypoparathyroidism, and instead of just affecting the whole thyroid?
I would say it's possible to have a hypoparathyroid, but it's not so common that we all hear about it.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say it can't. Never and always are words you don't hear scientists use. Just because as soon as you say that, it's kind of like the football commentators in the playoffs. Oh, he hasn't fumbled in over 500. Oh, fumble on the play. As soon as you say it, that's when there's going to be the exception, right? You will not say that word this semester. It's too soon.
C word?
It's too soon to talk about the C word to me.
Are you okay?
No, I'm not okay. I am not okay.
That word is not allowed in our house.
Okay, moving along. We're doing biology. Thank you. So parathormone also is going to increase vitamin D synthesis in the kidney. Vitamin D, again, we don't make it. We have to process it. And so vitamin D is going to be important. And it's going to have a negative feedback with parathormone. So the more vitamin D you have, the less parathormone. The less vitamin D, the more parathormone, and they're going to balance each other in that negative feedback process. So that's what parathormone does. All right, third major endocrine gland, the adrenal glands, also known as suprarenal. Supra meaning superior. What does superior mean? Above. Renal. Kidney. So this is literally a positional term, superior to the kidneys, and that's where you find the suprarenal, aka adrenal glands. Now, when you look at a cross section, you're going to see that there's a middle portion, we kind of mentioned it, the medulla, and the outer portion, which is called the cortex. Both of these regions produce hormones. And in the cortex, they really haven't illustrated it that well, But there are 3 distinct layers to the cortex. And each of these layers have different cells that produce different hormones. The medulla, this is going to be the one, its principal job, make adrenaline, secrete adrenaline. So we'll start with the easiest one, okay? The medulla has cells called chromaffin cells. And there's that word again, catecholamines. Did we have that in AMP1?
We did the coffin cells.
The chromaffin cells? Catecholamines are derivatives of tyrosine. Now, epinephrine, aka adrenaline, definitely a hormone derived from tyrosine. Norepinephrine or noradrenaline is principally a neurotransmitter. And if you look at the biosynthetic pathway, here's tyrosine, and in this particular illustration they left out an E, tyrosine. Tyrosine, in the metabolic pathway, you first take tyrosine, modify it to L-DOPA. That is transferred into dopamine. I don't know why they left the E's off all these. That then gets metabolized into norepinephrine. That then becomes epinephrine. Yeah.
So epinephrine.
Hang on a second.
Is the norepinephrine the neurotransmitter that releases the epinephrine?
No, no. These are both, it's like the thyroid gland. You got some T3 and you got some T4 that's released. These chromaffin cells are going to release some norepinephrine and some epinephrine. So in this particular case, it almost pains me to say it, 15% of what the adrenal medulla secretes is norepinephrine. It's secreted into the bloodstream. So here it's acting like a hormone. But principally, when you play with norepinephrine in the body, it's a neurotransmitter. Adrenaline, epinephrine, is always a hormone. And it just so happens that in the biosynthetic pathway, you have to make norepinephrine before you can make epinephrine. And it's going to be these last 2 things that get secreted by these chromaffin cells in the medulla. And they're going to get secreted when you get sympathetic stimulation. Those preganglionic sympathetic neurons, remember those? That's going to cause the release from the chromaffin cells into the bloodstream. And it's very quick. All right, so adrenal cortex. We're not going to learn all 25 different corticosteroids produced by the adrenal cortex. You thought the medulla was the business end of the adrenal gland. Nah, the cortex is doing a lot, and the adrenal cortex can be separated into 3 layers. The superficial or the outside layer is the glomerulosa. Zona just means zone or layer in this case. The middle layer that's lighter in color is the fasciculata, and then just adjacent to the medulla is going to be the reticularis. We say it's the deepest of the 3 cortical layers. And when you look at them up closer, this is the capsule of the adrenal gland. When we get to the kidney, you're going to look for things in the renal cortex that look like clusters of grapes. It's the glomerulus. You ever seen a glomerulus in histology yet? Well, these little round things out here, someone decided they look kind of like a glomerulus. So we got glomerulosa as the name. The middle layer has a lot of these little bubble-like vesicles. It looks, a word's called fasciculated, or like a cork has these empty segments. So the fasciculated look led to fasciculata. And the deepest layer has these interconnected cords, kind of like a maze, a network, and another name for a network is a reticulum, endoplasmic reticulum. So we got the reticularis.
Which one is the reticularis?
This one, this adjacent to the medulla. In your PowerPoint slide, I think on that 3rd layer, I think the title still says fasciculata. Change that to reticularis. The deepest layer, I think that is mislabeled because I copied slides and I forgot to change that title.
It looks right on mine.
Yeah,
Most of the
keep going.
That one?
Nope, one more. Keep going. Yeah, one more. One more. Yeah, wait, right there. See, deep layer, zona fasciculata change. What slide number?
51.
51. Slide 51 says zona fasciculata at the top. Change that to reticularis. I got it right on the composite slide here, but I just found it before class that I had mislabeled that on the specific slide. So make sure to change that. That's what happens when you're writing these on the fly. All right. Reticularis.
Who comes up with all these names?
Sorry?
Who comes up with all these names?
I don't know. I'll blame Dr. Golgi. I don't know. All right, let's get this one covered and we'll probably be done for the day. The zona glomerulosa, the cells in the zona glomerulosa, they synthesize mineralocorticoids. What in the word do mineralocorticoids do, and how did they get that name? We're working on minerals, but it's minerals that really function as solutes to control where water goes. Because we don't really move water. We don't have active transport water pumps. And so the way we get water to move where we want it to go is we move minerals. And when we look in the kidney, your kidney produces, are you ready for this?
No.
Your kidney filters out of your bloodstream 180 liters of fluid a day. You only have 5 liters of fluid in your whole bloodstream. But the kidney is going to move 180 liters of fluid during the day out of the blood. But fortunately, you put back all but about 1.5 liters.
How does that even work?
And the way you move that 180 liters is by blood pressure. And the way you get it back into the blood is with minerals. Sodium and potassium. You know our friend, the sodium-potassium pump?
So it's blood pressure and mineral?
Yep, but we're going to get to that in the kidney section. That was a preview. So we're regulating the electrolytes, ions, sodium and potassium, and that's going to cause water to go where we want. Aldosterone, we talked about that earlier. Aldosterone is going to regulate sodium and potassium, and those are our minerals we have to have. Where don't we use sodium potassium pumps?
Where don't we?
They're everywhere. They're everywhere. But in this case, for water balance, that's going to be important. And we're going to conserve or eliminate them in the kidney based upon the concentration that's detected in the bloodstream.